Level 1, Neophyte. You're taken from a world that will never know your name, the way every aspirant is, and handed over to a chapter that measures your worth in whether your body survives what it's about to do to it. The gene seed implantation kills more of you than the enemy ever will at this stage. Of the 11 boys who went under the surgeon's blade beside you, 4 are dead by the second month, and 2 more are wrong in ways nobody bothers explaining, sent quietly back to whatever world they came from without the honor of ever being told why. Nobody mourns them. Grief is for men who expected a fair outcome, and the chapter never promised you one. What it promises instead is that if your body accepts what's put into it, you'll spend the next several years in the scout company learning to kill without being seen, because a chapter that loses neophytes to carelessness has fewer Astartes to spend on the wars that actually matter. You learn fast that the scout sergeant grading you doesn't care how you feel about any of it. He cares whether you can hold still in cover for 6 hours without your discipline slipping, because the Marines above you were once exactly where you are now, and none of them got there by being comfortable. You spend those years learning the chapter's history the way you learn its tactics, by rote until the names of battles fought before your gene seed was ever harvested feel more real to you than the world you were born on. That's deliberate. A chapter that wants a Marine to die for it eventually needs him to believe he already belongs to it, entirely long before he's earned the armor that makes it official. Level 2, Battle Brother. You earn full battle plate the day your sergeant decides you've stopped being a liability, and the ceremony that comes with it is shorter than you expected. A few words from a chaplain in a suit of power armor that used to belong to a brother who didn't come back from wherever he was sent. You're assigned to one of the battle companies, and your first real campaign teaches you the difference between the drills that trained you and the war that's actually waiting. Half your squad's tactical doctrine exists because some earlier chapter generation learned it by losing brothers the slow way, and you understand fast that questioning the codex is a luxury reserved for Marines who've survived long enough to have earned an opinion. You bleed for ground that gets handed to guardsmen the following week and never hear its name again. You watch a brother die screening a retreat that saves 11 others, and nobody writes a song about him, because a chapter doesn't measure a death by how it felt, only by what it bought. You start keeping your own quiet tally of who around you fights for the chapter's glory and who fights simply to be noticed by it, because the second kind tend to get themselves and everyone near them killed chasing a distinction nobody's actually offering. Your sergeant makes a point of putting you in the positions that test that distinction directly, holding a flank alone long enough to wonder whether reinforcement is actually coming, because a battle company would rather lose you, finding out you can't be trusted under that kind of pressure, than lose an entire squad discovering it in the middle of a war that matters. Level 3, Veteran. A battle brother who survives enough campaigns without embarrassing his squad eventually gets summoned before a chaplain who already knows more about your service record than you remember living through yourself. Nomination to the veteran company isn't announced, it's simply confirmed after a review that goes back through every mission you've ever fought, and asks, bluntly, whether you're the kind of Marine the chapter can afford to lose more slowly than an ordinary one. You pass. Not every brother does. Some spend their entire lives as capable, honorable Astartes without ever being asked the question at all, and nobody explains to them why, because explaining it would mean admitting the standard exists in the first place. Being veteran company means every mission that comes down to you now is one the rest of the chapter has already decided is too costly to risk a battle company on. You start being sent in smaller numbers to do what used to take a full squad, and you start understanding watching brothers half your experience salute you in corridors you used to salute your own seniors in, that the chapter isn't rewarding you with an easier war. It's simply decided you are the kind of Marine an impossible one is worth spending. A veteran 2 decades senior to you dies on your third mission in the company, caught in the open by a weapon. His own experience should have let him read in time, and the rest of the company treats it less as a tragedy than as a data point. One more confirmation that survival at this rank has less to do with skill than with how many times you've already been lucky. You stop thinking of luck as something separate from skill somewhere around your own fourth close call, mostly because the distinction stops feeling like it matters once you're the one still standing. Level 4, Terminator. The armor itself arrives before the ceremony does, delivered by the chapter's artificers, with a reverence usually reserved for relics rather than equipment, because in every sense that matters, it is one. Tactical dreadnought armor doesn't fit you so much as it accepts you, sealing around a body that suddenly weighs more than 3 ordinary men and moves like it too. Your first steps in it feel less like walking and more like negotiating with a machine that has survived longer than you have and isn't entirely convinced you deserve to be inside it. Your first deployment as a Terminator is a teleport strike into the heart of an enemy position no conventional assault could reach in time, and the teleportarium adept running the calculation reminds you, without much comfort in his voice, that a miscalculation on his end reduces you to component atoms before you ever feel it happen. You materialize inside the enemy's own formation with seconds to spare and no possibility of retreat, built into the plan at all, because Terminators aren't deployed to hold ground, they're deployed to end an argument before the enemy realizes one has started. You walk out of that battle having taken hits that would have ended you 3 ranks ago, and the brothers who see you afterward look at you the way you used to look at Terminators, when you were the one standing in the battle companies, wondering if you'd ever earn the armor at all. The weight of it never fully stops surprising you, even after the first dozen deployments. Ordinary power armor lets a Marine forget, for stretches at a time, that he's wearing armor at all. Tactical dreadnought plate never lets you forget, and you come to understand that this is deliberate too, a suit built to remind the man inside it constantly of exactly how much the chapter has invested in making sure he doesn't die today. Level 5 Terminator Sergeant. Command of a Terminator squad comes to you the way most promotions do in tactical dreadnought armor, by simply being the veteran still breathing when the last sergeant isn't. Leading brothers, who are each individually worth an entire squad of ordinary Astartes, changes the arithmetic of every decision you make, because a mistake here doesn't cost the chapter a battle brother, it costs an asset the chapter spent years and irreplaceable relic armor building. You start weighing every order against a cost that used to be abstract and now has a face attached to it, several faces, brothers you fought beside since before either of you wore this plate. You lose one of them during an assault on a Xeno stronghold when a plasma coil overloads through a seam in his armor the artificers swore was sealed. You don't have time to grieve him before the mission demands you finish what he started, and you understand, walking away from what's left of him, that command in Terminator armor means carrying the weight of a death that shouldn't have been possible in the first place, and carrying it silently, because a sergeant who lets that weight show is a sergeant his remaining brothers stop trusting to lead them into the next impossible room. You start writing your own reports on every mission more carefully after that, not to protect yourself, but because the artificers need to know exactly which seam failed if the next squad wearing that pattern is going to survive contact with the same weapon. It's a small kind of grief, folding a brother's death into a maintenance log instead of a eulogy, but it's the only kind this rank has room for. Level 6, Honor Guard. The Chapter Master's Honor Guard is drawn exclusively from Terminator armored veterans, whose record leaves no room for doubt, and being chosen for it means standing exactly where his enemies aim first in every battle that matters enough for him to lead personally. You don't get thanked for the honor. Gratitude would suggest the Chapter Master sees your presence as a favor rather than a function, and by this rank you understand those aren't the same thing at all. What you get instead is proximity, close enough to hear the decisions he makes before the rest of the chapter hears the results of them, which battle brothers he trusts with the missions likeliest to kill them, and which ones he's already decided the chapter can least afford to lose. You take a blow meant for him during a void assault gone wrong, a Xenos blade that would have found the gap in his own armor if you hadn't been standing exactly where the position required. He doesn't speak of it afterward, not out of ingratitude, but because acknowledging it would mean admitting how close the chapter came to losing something an entire honor guard exists specifically to prevent. You start understanding, standing that close to him for the first time, how much of command is simply carrying weight nobody else in the room is allowed to see you carrying. You watch him make a decision during that same campaign that costs an entire squad their lives to buy 3 hours, the wider war desperately needed, and you watch him give the order without a flicker of hesitation, crossing whatever the rest of the chapter is permitted to see of his face. It's the first time you understand that reaching the top of this ladder was never going to mean the decisions get easier. It only means you stop being allowed to let anyone see that they aren't. Level 7, First Captain. The chapter master falls the way the greatest of them eventually do. Not cut down cleanly, but broken badly enough in a battle that saves an entire world that the healers can preserve little more than what the artificers can build a dreadnought sarcophagus around. You're the senior veteran in his honor guard when it happens, which makes you the obvious choice to take command of the first company in the interim. And obvious is a heavier word at this rank than it ever was as a sergeant. Every Terminator and veteran in the chapter now answers to your judgment, and every mistake you make gets measured against the legacy of a chapter master who can no longer be asked whether he'd have done it differently. You lead the chapter's response to the crisis that claimed him within the week, because a first captain who hesitates in front of the veteran company reads as a chapter master's mantle sitting on the wrong shoulders. The campaign succeeds at a cost that would have broken a lesser company, and you start understanding, the way every first captain eventually does, that you are no longer simply the chapter's best remaining sword. You are its answer to the question of who leads it, if the answer currently sitting in a dreadnought sarcophagus is never able to lead it again. You visit that sarcophagus once, in the weeks after the campaign, and stand in front of it long enough to say something to the man inside it that the machine's Vox grill never answers back. You don't know if he can even hear you anymore, sealed inside a war engine that will outlive both of you, but you go anyway, because a first captain who stops believing the chapter's oldest heroes are still listening tends to stop believing the chapter's newest ones are worth protecting either. Level 8, Chapter Master. The mantle becomes formally yours the way it becomes yours for every chapter master eventually, through a rite witnessed by the whole chapter rather than a vote taken by any part of it. Because a chapter doesn't debate who inherits 10,000 years of its own history, it simply recognizes when the burden has already found its shoulders. Command of every company, every relic, every battle brother's life now runs through decisions only you make, and the weight of it isn't the war itself, which you fought your entire life. It's the knowledge that every order you give is being measured against chapter masters who held this seat before your name existed, and will be compared to chapter masters who hold it long after you're a name. A tech marine reads off a memorial plaque. Deep beneath the fortress monastery, in a chamber that still smells of the surgeon's tools, a fresh aspirant is being told his gene seed implantation begins within the hour, and that most boys who begin it beside him won't be walking out of the surgery bay by the second month. He doesn't know yet what the chapter will eventually ask of the parts of him that survive, or how many ranks stand between the boy he is now and the armor he's never seen up close. A chapter doesn't remember its neophytes, its sergeants, or even most of its chapter masters by name, for very long once their sarcophagus is sealed. It only remembers that someone always answers when the codex calls the next name, and that somewhere in a chamber exactly like this one, someone always will. If this war was worth your time, hit like and subscribe for the next.